Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Transcript with me, JT. So it's been a couple of weeks. I'm going to pull back just a few pages. We were on page 100. I'm going to pull back to 99. And we are covering the trial of H.H. Holmes. And we've learned some things already. One, H.H. Holmes represented himself, which was fascinating. His defense attorneys wanted nothing to do with this case, and they tried to get out as soon as possible. So that's fun. And so we've gone through picking the jury. We've picked the jury, and now we're starting to question witnesses. We just finished. Well, we're working through a cross of a witness, and the district attorney is about to raise an objection. I'm so glad you all are here with me tonight. We're going to go ahead and start and go for an hour or so, or wherever the time takes me. This is what happens when you get done with a league and you come right home and you have 5 minutes to get on air. But thank you for joining me. Thank you. Feel free to chat in the side. I'm so glad you're here. Know that I probably won't pull much up just because most of this is just going to be reading the transcript. But that's where the community comes in. That's where the chatting between you all comes in. So as you're hearing this, feel free to comment and add your 5 cents or 35 cents, as the case may be. So I'm going to go through this and you can read along with me. This used to be called Trial Story Time. But I really decided that there needed to be a new title, and I think the Transcript just sounds, and so I'm planning on doing this every Wednesday night, a little bit later than usual, so maybe Pacific Coasters will enjoy, and we're gonna go through transcripts for as long as this show lasts. So here we go. The district attorney says, "This is not cross-examination of this witness at all, but I do not propose to press a merely technical objection. If the prisoner will intimate what the purpose of it is, or what connection it has with the case, so that the relation of it to the trial may be known, I will not object. But in the absence of any light upon that question, I call his attention to the fact that this is wholly irrelevant and not of the slightest value in determining the issue before the jury." Holmes says, "I could guard against that by having, I could guard against that by having the examination postponed. But I was assured I should be allowed to ask all the questions I desired. I wish by questioning this witness to determine whether upon that evening he had any conversation with him in regard to myself." The DA says, "That is not material. It is not evidence." Judge says, "Conversation with whom?" "Not as I can recollect. No conversation whatever. Only about the daughter." This is the witness. "He said to me he expected to bring on the girl. He did not speak of ever having seen me before. I do not know about that. He never spoke to me about it to my knowledge. After this Saturday morning, after you met me and were introduced at the insurance company's office, when did you next see me?" The questioner is Holmes. Answer, "I saw you about 1 o'clock when we were going to the Potter's Field." "Were you in the coroner's office that morning?" "Yes." "Did you see me there?" "Yes. You and I walked down together to the coroner's office and up the stairs together. During our journey from the coroner's office to the Potter's Field, were you in my company continually?" "No, sir. I was in Mr. Perry's company, and I was in yours, and I was in the girl's company." "Did you hold any conversation with me during that time?" "I wanted to know from you in the cars how these parties came to find out. I asked you first as to what your business was, and you said first you were a patent agent. I said it was strange to me where these parties could telegraph to you so quick and find you when they wanted you and where. You answered me, cut me short, and I had nothing further to say. Is it not a fact for at least 20 minutes on our journey you sat upon the same seat and conversed with me continuously upon the car?" "Not 20 minutes, because it did not take that long to get there. 10 minutes, perhaps? We had to change on 2 cars. The first car we got on, I did not have any conversation with you at all. It was in the second car I had the conversation, and we were up near the Potter's Field. Upon Saturday morning in the coroner's office, or upon the car, or any time during the day Saturday, did you state to me that you had seen a man, presumably the man whom you thought was a friend of Pitzel's, upon your first visit to his house? I told you I saw a man dressed in light clothes in Pitzel's house, which I recognized you to be the man by your walk with the change of clothes. You told me that day you recognized me as the party. I did not tell you that day, and I told nobody else, no more than you. Please repeat, then, the conversation as near as you can that took place in the coroner's office and upon the car, or any time on Saturday, with me relative to this friend of Pitzel's whom you saw in his house. The conversation we had in the car was that you said you knew this man for 8 or 9 years, that you could identify him, and that you came along here to identify him for the benefit of the company. You did not tell me that company had paid your expenses here or nothing, but you said you came along here to identify the man for the benefit of the company. I asked you what business you were in, and you told me you were in the patent business, a patent agent. I says, well, I have some patents I would like to dispose of, and probably you could do something in the matter. You kind of shunned me on that. You did not want to get into details about that. I asked you then what part of the country you were in at the time you got the telegram. Or I asked you first, how did you come to know that Pitzel was dead? You told me there was a telegram that came from his wife, from Mr. Pitzel's wife to you. I says, if you are a patent agent and you travel so much in the United States, how could these people find out where to catch you with a telegram right on the spot? You shunned me there. That was the conversation, and no more. Then upon that Saturday, you said that no mention was made to me or in my presence to others regarding a friend of this man whom you had previously seen in Pitzel's house. None any more than the man who went upstairs in the light clothes. I have already told you that I identify the prisoner as the man who went up in the light clothes by your walk. May it please the court, what confuses me is when this identification takes place. Now, in the court, you did not identify me that day? He says no. You say you did not speak to anybody of it that Saturday. I say I identified you going to the Potter's Field as the man who went upstairs in light clothes, which I had never mentioned to anybody at that time. Did you speak to anyone or have any conversation upon that Saturday relating to this strange man you saw in Pitzel's house? None that I know of. Upon reaching the Potter's Field, the body had already been taken from the ground? Yes. Where was it? Where did the body lay at that time? The body lay in a little shed, a kind of tool shed, I think it was. Upon our first reaching the Potter's Field, before you had seen the body, in fact, before anyone had seen it, where were we standing? How far away from the building? I was standing at the cremating place, where the furnace stands on the corner. Not in the corner, but I call it a corner where you turn into the furnace, and this tool house stood about northeast from there. You have spoken of Dr. Mattern, or a doctor who first made an examination of the body? Yes. How many minutes do you think that lasted? I cannot tell you how many minutes it lasted because I had no watch to keep any account. Do you think that is material? Yes, sir, for a particular reason. Upon Dr. Mattern's leaving the building, what did you notice as soon as he came out of the building? What was his first act? Had he gloves upon his hands at that time? Yes. What did he do with them upon leaving the building? He took the gloves off. You took off your coat, put the gloves on, and went to work yourself. Dr. Mattern, after taking off the gloves, what then did he do? He went to wash his hands. How long did that occupy him? I do not know. I did not figure on that. Waiving that, then, was it before or after he had washed his hands that he handed me the gloves? I think it was before he washed his hands he handed you the gloves, because you had your coat off ready to put on the gloves as he took them off. I stood there ready to grasp the gloves immediately, I presume. Was there any conversation with Dr. Mattern or the insurance company? I presume the idea was that Dr. Mattern was not doing as you wanted him to do, and you would help him out. What did you see after Dr. Mattern left that building? You say I seized the gloves? Yes. And immediately went into the building? You were in the building at the time. Without waiting to hold any conversation with Mr. Faust, Dr. Mattern, or anyone? Not as I know of. What does this amount to? I object to having it understood that I, in my great anxiety to ignore Dr. Mattern in this matter, was standing there ready and did grasp these gloves, so that I could not wait a sufficient length of time before I could get in there with the body. That is the impression that is given by this witness in this court. It is not material whether you grasped the gloves or how you got them. I only want to show you did find the marks of identification to show this was Pitzel's body. I object to the bloodthirsty way which the district attorney and this witness are inclined to make it appear that I did rush into that building and mutilate the dead body of my friend. You are the only one who draws that inference. All the witness says is that Dr. Mattern took off the gloves and you put them on to point out the marks of identification. Nobody has said you did it in a great hurry. The charge has not been made here in court. But in the questions which the district attorney asked this witness, it certainly appeared to me that that point was dwelt upon. There was not a word said. All you say upon the subject is your inference. Then if the court will pass upon the question whether it is a proper one or not. What is the question? The question is whether I stood there when this doctor came out and immediately grasped these gloves before stopping to talk or hold any conversation with Mr. Faust and Dr. Mattern and rushed into this building? Answer the question. As I already told you, I cannot recollect that you had any conversation with anyone. After I had entered this shed or room, was I alone? Were you with me in that little room where the body lay after I had put on these gloves and entered the room? Yes, sir, I was there. Was Dr. Mattern present? Yes, sir. You state that I turned the body upon the face. Turned the man upon his face? Yes, sir. You are positive of that? Positive you had the handling or turning of the man over upon his face? Positive I turned the man on his face? You were handling him. Are you positive I turned this man on his face? I am positive you helped. The point I wish to make, if the court please, is whether Dr. Mattern was present at that time and aided me. He was present at the time. You and him were the only two around the corpse. You state Dr. Mattern had gone out to wash his hands, and I had gone into the building, and I turned the man upon his face. The man had already been turned upon his face before Dr. Mattern gave you the gloves. You helped to turn him on his face in order to make your identification clear. By the district attorney. So as to get at the wart? So as to get at the wart, as you call it. Prisoner, did Dr. Mattern assist in this second examination? Did he do anything towards the identification of the body after he left the building and washed his hands? As far as I can recollect, Dr. Mattern could not identify the body. You were brought there to identify the body. You were to show the marks and tokens by which you would identify the body, and he was trying to examine the body for these marks and tokens you said were on the corpse. Therefore, he looked for the scar on the leg, which he could not find at first, and you brought his attention to it and pulled the skin from the leg, or at least the skin was pulled from the leg, either by you or Dr. Mattern, and the scar was got. The thumbnail was taken. It was blackened and bruised, and that was taken from the hand. There was part of the mustache taken, and the skin was pulled off the nose. Then you said there was a wart on the back of his neck. When I began to oh, that's a word. Catechize. Catechize? What? Vocabulary day with JT. Catechize. Catechize. Instruct in the principles of Christian religion. Oh, okay. When I began to catechize you about seeing these marks visible, you said there was a wart on the... I don't think that's the right definition. Nix it. on the back of his neck, and we will soon see that. And you took hold of the box, and you and Dr. Madden turned the body over. You immediately got the gloves before he left, put them on, and pulled a lance out of your pocket and gouged this, what you call the wart, out of the back of his neck. It was placed in paper and handed over to the doctor with part of the mustache of the man. This second visit into this building after Dr. Mattern had washed his hands. I do not know that there was any second visit at all. After he had washed his hands, I went into the building with the gloves upon my hands. You were already in the building. When you received the gloves, you were already in the building waiting to do your work. Dr. Mattern came back after he washed his hands and was with me at that time also? That I do not know. I will not say nothing, only what I know to be a fact. I do not know whether after he washed his hands. I shall keep on here unless the court rules differently until I get direct answers. Sir, you are getting direct answers. Direct answers are being got. Oh, good night. He has given you direct answers. You have been putting indirect questions. At this time, when you say the skin was stripped away from his leg, who did that? I believe I was the person who told Dr. Mattern to pull the skin from the leg. Who did it? I told him to do it. Dr. Mattern was the man who pulled it off. Not myself, as you have stated. I did not say you pulled the skin off. I said you cut the wart out of his neck. Dr. Mattern and myself made a careful examination for this scar upon the leg. Yes. Failing to find it? Yes. And I called his attention to pull the skin off and see if it is there. He just rubbed it off with his thumb. Instead of my going in and doing all this, you, Dr. Mattern, and myself did it. There was nobody there to do anything, only you and Dr. Mattern. And yourself? I was not there to do anything. I was there to look on. You were recommending and advising the doctor what to do. I was there to see that you identified the corpse, to see that you found the scar, to see that you identified the corpse, which you said you would. You speak of my offering $30. To whom did I offer $30 to burn the corpse? You did not particularly offer it to anybody, but you said you would give $30 to cremate the corpse, and you asked Mr. Howe, the lawyer, what he thought about it. And Mr. Howe turns around and says, well, I cannot say anything in the matter until I see his wife. Now, I wish the examination of this witness on these very important questions to be postponed while the notes taken in regard to his first testimony can be read in court. We cannot do that. You must go on. You refuse to grant me the reading of these notes? Yes. You must make your own notes as I have made mine. That there may be no more misunderstanding. I was laboring under the impression that the notes here in court were subject to reference at any time. It is impossible to stop every 15 or 20 minutes and make transcripts for lawyers or parties. I mean, during the progress of the case. No. You spoke something and he turned right back. He turned right back and was like, we're just going to keep questioning. This is a who's on first, what's on second. You spoke something in regard to my expenses being paid by the company and thought it strange or something of the kind. That came out in the paper afterwards, where I ascertained. That has nothing to do with the evidence whatever. I can give you nothing at all on that, because that is a thing in the paper, the public press. Then you have no positive knowledge that the company paid me? I have no positive knowledge, only what I saw in the paper. What I do not know, I cannot say. By Mr. Graham. A good deal of time was spent by Mr. Holmes in asking you whether you could see from here to there, indicating. Do you mean to say you actually saw these men walking up the stairs, or that from where you were over here, you saw them enter the doorway where the stairway is? Here's the stairs upon that corner. You go into that door, a little entry goes out in the backyard, and right across there where I stood, there was nothing there to stop me, to stop my eyes seeing them taking that corner in their hand and walk up the stairs turning the corner. Was this door open? That was wide open. Did you see him turn here? Yes. I saw them put their hand on that corner and walk upstairs. That is what you mean by saying they went upstairs. Yes. There are many, perhaps all of the witnesses that will appear for the Commonwealth that I may want to call for the defense. Will it be necessary to subpoena them? DA says, I will keep them all here until the end of the trial. William Rao is recalled. District Attorney asks, just say whether or not you took this photograph of the house, number 1316 Callow Hill Street. Yes, sir, I did. One represents the front view. This is the front. And the other represents the rear view. Yes, sir. And in there, through the flat area, the two windows that open, the double window that opens into the back room in the second story. Is that right? Yes, sir. I offer these pictures and evidence. I would again ask that all the other witnesses be excluded from the courtroom during the testimony of this witness, William J. Scott. There has been no reason shown for it. I will try to show a reason. I bet you will. And it will apply pretty much to all or several of the other witnesses. If you will allow me, I will try to illustrate it. I would like to ask when Dr. Mattern, for instance, comes upon the stand, certain questions asked of the witness, Smith, and I do not think it is just to my side of the case that these other witnesses should sit here and receive the full benefit of all the questions that have been asked the witnesses here upon the stand, giving them time to consider them and make up their answers or arrange their answers. Okay, DA says. If I understand, you want Dr. Mattern out while this witness testifies. There are other witnesses from different places that have no relation whatever to this part of the testimony, and nothing would be gained or be disadvantageous to the slightest degree by listening to this witness's testimony. Any reasonable request I am willing, as a matter of more than courtesy to the prisoner, to allow, and will allow them to go out in view of the fact he is here defending his own case, or your own case. I do not propose to create a disturbance by sending everybody out. Can you imagine being in a courtroom and turning and Holmes is just on the table next to you? Yeah. I wish to have it definitely settled if I could. What is your present request? This witness whom I have called, Dr. Scott, will testify that he found at will testify what he found at number 1316 Callow Hill Street. For the reason that it gives the witnesses not examined an insight into this portion of the case. For that reason, I wish that they could be excluded from the courtroom and let that apply to all of the witnesses. I will not agree to that. I am willing to do anything reasonable. I am in ignorance of the fact whether it is for you to make the rulings in regard to the case or whether the honorable judge. I have been trying ever since the trial began to have that definitely settled. The judge says, sometimes you and the district attorney settle matters without troubling me. If you ask me to exclude all the witnesses in this case, the request will be denied. But witnesses to the same fact who corroborate each other will be directed to retire. I ask an exception. Exception granted. I would then ask that all the witnesses pertaining to this particular case, that is, to all the happenings that took place in and about Philadelphia, be excluded from the courtroom during the examination of this witness. You desire the witnesses present at the examination of the body in the Potter's Field to be excluded? If that is your request, we will ask them to retire. Do I understand that my request to have all the other witnesses that are intimately associated with this portion of the case? If need be, I will give the names of as many of them as I have of those I consider as competent witnesses in this case pertaining to Mr. Pitzel's death. Do you desire to have the witnesses present at the examination of the body in Potter's Field to retire? If so, that request will be granted. I do so desire. He got there. We got there, ladies and gentlemen. We got there. Thank you. I love seeing that now. That's a lovely thing to see. That is what I offered to him when he so ungraciously referred to the fact he did not know who made the rulings. I did not make it ungraciously. I would like Mr. Faust, Mr. Perry, Dr. Hill, Deputy Coroner Dugan, Oh, that's a great name. I think his name is, and Mr. Smith, if he is to be called on rebuttal, to retire. Mr. Smith has testified to all I propose to call him to testify. Jephthah D. Howe is a witness in this case. He is not here now. I heard he was here. I would also like Dr. Mattern to retire. That is all I can name under this ruling of the court. To have this matter definitely decided once and for all, I would ask that all the other witnesses to be called in this case for the prosecution to be excluded. It has been decided they will not be sent out, and you have an exception. It is not necessary to duplicate the matter. All the witnesses pertaining to this part of the case, what took place at number 1316 Callowhill Street, and at the exhumation of the body at the Potter's Field, have been directed by the court to leave the courtroom, and in compliance with that have left. Not having known the witnesses' names, I am at a loss to know whether all have retired. Jesus Christ. The prisoner need not be so suspicious. I have volunteered to tell him of two other witnesses in the room, the police officers, the only other two I know of. He ought to be convinced somebody is honest in the case. Everybody connected with this question has gone out of the room. Are you satisfied? No, I am not. In making my request to the court, I became confounded. I think I can make it in another way, as I have not the list. I have been denied that. When Mr. Smith testified, he gave the names of all the persons who were there. Do I understand that that is all who are going to be called in this case? They cannot call anybody who was not there. I am laboring under a disadvantage in the matter, but I certainly want a ruling from the court as to whether I make it as a request that all the other witnesses pertaining to this particular case regarding happenings that took place in regard to Pitzel's death here should be excluded from the room. Such witnesses as Dr. Alcorn, for instance. Was Dr. Alcorn present? Not at this transaction. I say to the court officially that every witness called into this court by the Commonwealth whose testimony would relate to what took place at number 1316 Callowhill Street, the Potter's Field, or facts about which the witness called to the stand is about to testify, every witness of that kind has been excluded from this room. I can say no more, do no more. If this man does not believe me, I cannot help it. It is not a matter of disbelief. It is simply to get a ruling in regard to this matter. You have a ruling and exception. What more can you get? I will put it in another and easier way to have it understood. Oh, goody. I will ask to have John Grammer excluded. Also Miss Alice Pierce. In fact, all those who are to give testimony in regard to what took place here in Philadelphia, not only at Potter's Field and this house, but anyone related to the case in Philadelphia. What other witnesses are there? There are several witnesses as to other facts here in Philadelphia, but not witnesses to the matters that Dr. Scott will testify about. For the present, your motion to exclude all the other witnesses from matters occurring about Philadelphia is refused. If hereafter it develops that two or more corroborative witnesses should be here, you can make your motion to exclude all except the one being examined at the time, and then the motion will be entertained. I ask an exception. Exception granted. Of course, it is understood this is not done as a ruling as a matter of law, but as a right to this prisoner. It is simply a question of the effect of it in the future. It is not done to establish a precedent. That is what I'm trying to be satisfied of in my own mind in regard to whether the witnesses pertaining to the Philadelphia transaction cannot be excluded. We will dispose of the contingencies of the future as they arise. I propose, before beginning with this witness, in view of the circumstances of this case, an evident desire to create sympathy, to say that as an act of grace and entirely without any basis of legal duty upon me at all, I propose to request all the witnesses relating to the Philadelphia branch of this case to retire from the courtroom. I do this because this man is here without counsel. If represented here by counsel, I would contest it at every point. I assure Mr. Graham and wish him to know I appreciate that favor. I know what you are after, and I do not propose that you shall secure it. It is what I consider my right. Mr. Barlow calls a list of all the witnesses, who, as they answer to their names, are requested to retire, and do so. Now, in regard to my wife, as I inquired yesterday, I shall have to inquire again today. To which one do you refer? To which one do you refer? Point DA. I will answer you as I did yesterday. To one whom you have seen fit to designate as Miss Yoke, thereby casting a slur upon her as well as myself. Honestly, you probably haven't missed anything if you end up losing your place. They've been going back and forth about these witnesses for like 3 pages. You just wait for the next like little bookmark and then continue on. Prisoner says, oh wait, hold on. DA says, that is what she wants to be designated herself. The man who laid the foundation of the slur is the man who married her with 2 other wives living. I shall challenge you to prove that. That we shall do. I ask if my wife is to be a witness and ask her to be excluded. You see, H.H. Holmes married his 3rd wife. He was still together with the other. It's a whole thing. Go back to watch Crazy Crimes, True Crime and Wine Time. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Ridiculous. I cover it. DA says, if you are speaking of Miss Yoke, and I must call her by the name she gave me, for she has the right to say what name she prefers. If you mean Miss Yoke, I will decline to inform you whether she will be examined as a witness or not. But she is not in the courtroom, if that is a matter of any satisfaction to you. I certainly do not want to be antagonistic. I would rather the case would go on quietly. There is no necessity for any apologies. I understand you perfectly. You have said I am trying to create sympathy. That is the last thing I am trying to do. Woof. Dr. William J. Scott is sworn in. We made it. The district attorney begins asking questions. On direct. Where do you live? It's really hard not to do this. It's like Monty Python. What is your name? Where do you live? Northeast corner of 13th and Vine. Have you a drugstore there? I have. Mr. Geyer is here, and he may be called as a witness to what you say. Do you want him to go out too? Yes, I want him out. Mr. Geyer retires. Do you remember the 4th of September of last year? I do. I can't remember yesterday. What do you know of the finding of this body at number 1316 Callow Hill Street that day? Between 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning, which I think was either Monday or Tuesday. I will not say the day of the week. I was called out by a police officer and asked if I would not step over with him to Callow Hill Street, that there was a dead body there. You were called by a police officer? Yes. In consequence of what he said, you went to 1316 Callow Hill Street. I did. Tell the jury in your own way what you found there. The officers conducted me upstairs in the back room on the 2nd floor, and we found a body lying in the position of north and south. The body was lying very composed, with the right arm over the chest in this way, the left arm to his side. The face was much mortified, indicating putrefaction. There was considerable stench in the room. Everything seemed to be very orderly with him. The body was lying just due north and south on the floor. We found around the room a broken bottle, some uncorked bottles on the mantel, the fireplace open, a window slightly raised, and the door leading from the front room into the back room also open, and the one leading into the back room partly open, in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 inches, I suppose. Both doors were open? Yes. The window partly raised and the fireboard open? Yes. All the way or only partly? Only on a slight jar, between 8 and 12 inches. That is the fireboard that covered the fireplace over the one facing Callow Hill Street. and the one facing on the back street called Carlton Street was tight against the wall in its place. How about the shutters? The shutters were bowed. Will you go on and just tell the whole of circumstances, everything you saw, what you found? When the officer came to call me to the house, he said he thought it was a case of explosion, that a man had been burned to death. Don't tell what they said to you. I went to the house expecting to find a man burned to death, or blown to death by an explosion. When we went in, as a matter of course, we looked over the room very carefully to see if there were any signs that there had been an explosion, and what caused this man to be lying in the position he was. As I stated, this bottle was cracked and broken. A number of bottles were on the shelves that contained a red fluid smelling as though, and we came to the conclusion they contained a mixture of benzene, chloroform, and likely a small amount of ammonia. It was colored red. The shutters were bowed and fixed at a peculiar angle so that the sun, we argued that the sun coming up, would strike against the shutters so that it would strike right on this man's body, and the same way the sun in setting. What part of the body? From the abdomen up. The lower part was shaded by the abutment, where the window fitted into it. The shutters seemed to be angled in such a position that the sun would catch his body pretty well for the whole day, coming up and going down. There was nothing to protect it there where the body laid. The sun pouring on a tin roof, like a cat, and on the body. We found the face discolored and distorted, or cuticles separated and watery like. That was the process of decomposition. The odor was terrible. The room smelled very bad. It appeared that the room had been so fixed by allowing the draft to blow from these openings made there to the fireplace, so that the stench was mostly carried up the chimney, and you would not get the stench until you got on the far side of him toward Broad Street. And then it smelled very bad, but the side toward the door was not so bad because the draft carried it away from me. That was by reason of the window, as I understand, and the opening of the fireboard made a draft. That carried the odor up through the chimney. His head was catching most of the sun, apparently, so that had undergone the most decomposition. That was far gone, more so than the rest of the body. When we loosened his shirt and undershirt, that was fairly in a good state of preservation, excepting in the groins over the abdomen was very black, and that is where putrefaction mostly commences anyhow. His tongue was swollen and stuck out of his mouth, and red fluid issued from his mouth. There was a red fluid issuing from his mouth, and any little pressure on the stomach or over the chest here would cause this fluid to flow more rapidly, and to raise the head a little, to raise the head a little would cause it to flow more rapidly. His mustache was singed, just as though a flame had flashed over and singed his mustache a little bit, and eyebrow, and the side of his head or hair. Also on the right side of the pectoral muscle, the muscle in the breast, and the side of his arm, the axillary, were burned, and under the arm where it was placed to the side here was in good healthy condition, was not touched by the flame. At his head, turned facing toward Broad Street, was laid a pipe recently filled, and looked very much as if he had taken a match and made a puff from it. That is, there was a burned match and a pipe beside him, and right beside his head. The tobacco had been lighted? Yes, scorched. The little pieces that stick up from the tobacco as a pipe is filled were burned. Just a little bit of ashes connected with it. Right beside this pipe, a little over towards Broad Street, between the chimney and his head, laid this bottle. The bottle was broken. The glass that had been broken laid inside the bottle. All the compound found in these bottles was that was explosive was benzene, so that the argument was brought forth that it was an explosion. The argument was brought up that his death was due to an explosion, and that is what the officers were going to report. And to say that it had not been an explosion, we took particular notice of the pipe as it laid there. It appeared it had dropped out of the man's mouth, but the stem was far between the chin and shoulders as his head laid there, in such a way that it would have been impossible for the pipe to have fallen from this man's mouth and lay there in that condition, because when we took hold of the bowl of the pipe to raise it, holding the end of the stem. It was impossible to get it past his shoulder, the stem at all. It was fully an inch. Do you say the pipe must have been placed there? We were arguing it between ourselves. Do you say from what you observed that it was placed there? I claim it was placed there. It could not have fallen? Not that way. They argue there must have been an explosion of the fluid in the bottle, but if there had been an explosion there, instead of finding the fragments of the bottle inside, we would have found them scattered all over the room. Instead of that, all these pieces lay inside the bottle and the neck of the bottle where the cork is placed. On that, there were a few little black marks that looked as if burned paper or something had been placed on it. Just tell what you saw. Don't tell any arguments. I would rather not the witness would confine himself to what he saw, and not, as the district attorney has already said, give any arguments in regard to it. The glass was not scattered around the room, as would be the case in an explosion, but was inside the bottle? Yes. Parts were inside the bottle? Yes. It looked as if the bottle had been taken with force and crushed on the floor and broken, and the pieces fell inside of it. How with relation to the corpse itself? The body laid very peaceful, quiet, looked as though the man had fallen into a sleep, and life had passed away from him without a struggle. His shirt and undershirt, the pantaloons and underpants and stockings, that being the clothing he had on at the time, as well as the shirt bosom, was not mussed. And when we were examining his body for money, that is, the coroner's people, you could see that the clothing was not disturbed at all. They were all in nice condition. The clothing was in nice condition on him and not disturbed? No. A juror asks, what? The juror asks, not burned? The clothing was burned over his right arm, and the shoulder was burned a little bit. Yes, it was not, however, a burn. It was more of a char, so that the goods to a great extent were left charred and did not fall apart. Not burned so as to fall away. Yeah, so in the shed, so they actually brought him. What's the word I'm looking for? They brought him out of where he lay to identify him. I can't think of the word. So this happens before that situation. This was the discovery of Pitzel's body, and then they exhumed. That's the word. Then the other story was afterwards when they exhumed his body so that Holmes could identify him. Because this was in Philly and Holmes was in Chicago. Something like that. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's the same body, just two different times. And he was only ever convicted of one murder. That was it. So the clothing was not burned through to the skin. Yes, it was burned through to the skin. The district attorney said it had not fallen apart in pieces? No. You say the clothing was not disheveled? No. While it was burned at this part, the shirt was not pulled out of the trousers. No, it fitted in as if you had dressed yourself and laid down or been laid down. You say the right hand was laid across the breast, right across the chest, yes? Where was the left hand? Right close to his side, and his feet out in the position of standing, close together that way. His feet were turned out in this way, naturally. The body was lying on the floor in that position? Yes, with the feet turned out. Were you present at the post-mortem examination of this body? I was. Who conducted or made the examination? Dr. Mattern. The coroner's physician? Yes, sir. Since you were present, will you also tell us what was the result of the examination of the body? When the post was made in the afternoon, I became interested in the case. A careful examination was made. We went over the body to look for points of identity. The face was disfigured so that you could not get any marks of any kind to look for, except we took notes of the teeth, the peculiar irregularities of them, the absence of teeth, and they looked to be very much unkempt. We found a cowlick on his left side, hair-combed pompadour. He had a stumpy mustache, no more hair than was necessary on his lip to make a mustache, and was very scanty along his face. These were points of identity, all we could find at the time. The body was well kept and well nourished, appeared to weigh between 170 and 180 pounds, very heavy and muscular. Dr. Mattern opened the skull and the brain was examined very carefully. We found a normal brain, no congestion of any nature, and we put that down as a normal brain. The thorax was opened and taken out, and the lungs were examined. The heart was first taken out, and the pericardium, and we found no effusion or adhesions. The heart was empty, leading you to believe death was sudden. The lungs were very much congested, both hydrostatic. Hydrostatic is natural to all dead people. Hydrostatic congestion did not play any part with this. The other parts of his lungs were very much congested and very full of blood. His liver was also large and congested, and the same with his spleen. His kidneys were what are called pigback kidneys, a peculiar kidney found with people who are alcoholic kidneys, so that the man was one who had not refused to drink when he had a chance to take it. That's a nice way to say it. We also found the stomach congested, but chronic congestion, not acute congestion as you would expect to find from fluid found in his stomach. It was empty, but a fluid found to be chloroform was in his stomach. His lungs showed the odor of chloroform very perceptibly. The stomach was well preserved, and so were the lungs and heart. The bladder was empty, showing that the sphincter muscles had been paralyzed, and I also believe there had been an action of the bowels, that the sphincter muscles had been paralyzed there. We came to the conclusion that the chloroform had been used in a large dose, that death was sudden, because we found the heart empty and the lungs congested. We found the lungs congested, and after we found the odor of chloroform in the lungs, knowing that the action of chloroform oftentimes is that it will stop respiration before it will the heart, we came to the conclusion that the blood in the lungs where blood was left, there was on account of the heart working afterwards to drive the blood out, and no action of the lungs to send it back to the heart again. The same way, sometimes the liver will be filled, and it was also congested. His death was very sudden, and the conclusion was chloroform poisoning. Understand, the chloroform found in this man's stomach did not show acute inflammation as it would be if administered during life. We found inflammation, but it was tough and thickened, going to show there had taken place alcoholic changes. That which you found in the stomach was due to alcoholic effects? Yes. And not due to the chloroform found in the stomach? No. Had the chloroform in the stomach been introduced there, could you tell before death or after death? Finding no inflammation or no congestion of a stomach, which would have been the results of if chloroform had been taken in life, I would say it was put there after death. You found the odor of chloroform in the lungs. Yes. This congested condition of the lungs, was that the natural result of inhaling chloroform? It could be. When it produced death. It produces death, yes, sir. The empty condition of the heart, was that consistent with chloroform poisoning? Yes, sir. The condition of the kidneys was also an alcoholic effect? Yes. Had nothing to do with the cause of death? No, sir. There was no diseased condition, not showing the nature of brights or anything like that. No more than alcoholic changes had taken place, which show a peculiar shape like a pigback, which gets its name from pigback, a kidney resulting from alcoholism. You say that the result of the post was to indicate that this man died from chloroform poisoning, and you have found no evidence of any struggle, the body composed, legs straight, arms in position, clothing not disarranged, everything indicating a perfectly peaceful position for the corpse. Could chloroform, if self-administered, could a person taking chloroform have arranged and placed his body as this body was found? No, sir. That could not be. Impossible. Why? If a man was taking it by the mouth to produce death, it would produce more or less spasms with him. It would not be a death from shock immediately. He would not drop and be dead. There would be more or less spasms. He would vomit and fight the dose. If taking by inhalation, he could go on for such a length of time. But after that time, he would lose consciousness. He would not be able to govern his own willpower. And would fall wherever he was? Yes, you could not start out and say you were going to take so much chloroform, and when you get to such and such a place or extent you are going to stop, Unconsciousness comes sudden. You would lose consciousness and lose power to arrange the body. There would be a loss of consciousness and a loss of power to arrange the body as this was found. Yes, sir. Did you notice the involuntary muscles that were relaxed in this body? We only noticed that the two sphincters of the bladder and bowels were relaxed. Did that occur on the floor of the second story? Yes. That had occurred in the room where the corpse was found? Yes. And the fluid from the mouth you have described, was that anywhere else but in the second story room? No, sir. And a small stream had run down, filling the grain of the board from the mouth and the nostril. Referring to this explosion, jury questions again. Referring to this explosion, should this explosion be so powerful, would that not tear the clothes in every direction? As the witness says, the clothing has been burned but not disarranged. If the explosion would be powerful, we would like to know how powerful that explosion was. It would naturally tear everything to pieces, would it not? That is a matter you can judge of as well as anyone else. But, doctor, if you know what effect a powerful explosion would have on the clothing or flesh, please state it. Dealing with a glass bottle, you would find it pretty full of glass in the man handling it. Instead of finding the glass in the bottle, in this case, instead of finding the glass in the bottle, in this case, instead of finding the glass in the man, you would find it in the bottle. In point of fact, we will show there was no explosion. The prisoner admits there was no explosion, and has said so. Were you at Potter's Field when the body was taken up? No, sir. I would ask that the court be adjourned for sufficient time for lunch. I have not eaten anything today, and I feel physically unable to go on with the cross-examination. I dread to refer again to the matter of the witnesses, but should witnesses be allowed to converse with each other relative to the case? We cannot lock the witnesses up. We cannot have control over them outside of the court. We have given you a great deal more in the way of privileges and favors than ever has been practiced in the state. I do not know of a case in this state where witnesses have all been excluded, but the district attorney has agreed to it, and of course, I agree. We will take a recess until 2:30. Court adjourned until 2:30 p.m. And that is where we're going to hold off. The next bit, Holmes is going to cross-examine Dr. Scott, the man who found Pitzel on his floor in Philly. That is sure to be some fun. He is a piece of work. Tell you what, the more we get into this, the more I'm like, he was like a century too early for the whole sovereign citizen thing. What a terrible dude. What an obnoxious fella that guy is. Well, listen, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to be back next Wednesday again with more. So we did a solid 32 pages. 32 pages? No, 25 pages. We did a solid 25 pages, and we will keep that going. Tomorrow at 9:00 p.m. Eastern, True Crime and Wine Time Live is happening, and Brew Crime is guesting. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be Terry, me, Mike, and we're going to be talking about prison escapes, prison crimes. As a preview, I'm doing the Texas 7, so that's going to be a good time. Friday, the very first episode, the premiere episode of Women on Death Row, a mini-series I'm putting together, is going to premiere. That is going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then, let's see, Monday is still quiet. Night Court is under construction. That is going, it's looking good. It's looking good. I'm thinking in September, Night Court will be coming back in a new way. So get excited about that. Every Tuesday, a second episode of Women on Death Row will be released as well, also at 9 p.m. We have standardized the times for either video premieres, releases, or live shows at 9 p.m. Eastern, no matter what. So we are really trying to build this channel up. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share. we live in a holler. So just holler and be like, this show's cool. You should subscribe. Post it on socials and things like that. It's really helpful to us. We are this close. As you can see, we've got super chats and things this close to opening up memberships. So I'm very excited about that. Again, I appreciate you all so much. That is very true. That is accurate. It's like talking to a wall. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you. Please take care of yourself, your friends, your family, and your community. Do not let anybody dull that sparkle. Never. And shine on, you crazy diamonds. Shine on. I will see you tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern, for True Crime and Wine Time Live. Bye, everybody.